After more than 43 years of enjoying life as a wedding planner, this remarkable story is of one man's search for purpose in living his second life. After being in a car explosion and burned 40% of his body, his story is filled with courage, inspiration, and hope for both the individual that suffers catastrophic injury and the family that loves them. 1 year prior to the car explosion, his 18-year-old niece became an organ donor. He will share how her story and his story give him a greater meaning of organ and tissue donation. After he concludes, there will be time for a few questions. Please give a warm welcome to Michael Nolte.
Good afternoon, guys. I have to tell you, it's a joy to be here. I've had the opportunity to address the rally 2 or 3 times in the past 20 years that I've been eligible as an organ recipient to do so. I hope you also know that the Gift of Life organization presents about 300 such presentations to high schools throughout the city. And as a result of that, we have a lot of people in Kansas City who know the importance of organ donation. My sharing with you this afternoon will be to tell you about my experiences, what I'm going to call both sides of the OR, meaning the operating room. One of the people that's not able to be here is my beloved niece, Micah, who was 18 years old, and she was named for me, very close. I have 3 daughters, and she is one of 4 children. Those cousins were almost raised as siblings, vacationing together, every holiday together. And just to tell you how quickly life can change would be that she graduated from her high school graduation in mid-Missouri, the small town I'm from, Chemours, Missouri. And a month later, in the middle of a Sunday afternoon, no drugs, alcohol, or rain involved, she was crossing the railroad tracks of an unguarded railroad crossing, kind of in the country a little bit, but there was no gates and no whistles and no lights. And a train came roaring around a bluff that was filled with trees that had not been cut back yet by Union Pacific. And even though she stopped, she looked, she listened, the Jeep that she was in was run over. As a result of that, Micah was killed instantly and in the absolute peak of health. My wife and I live in Leawood, and she is a registered nurse who had worked previously at the University of Missouri Hospital in Columbia, Missouri, which is where I started my company in 1980. She knew nurses that were still there in that ICU, and as we were making the mad drive from Kansas City to Columbia, Missouri, to be with my sister, my parents, my other sister, my niece who was then dead, but I could not believe that, I heard Barbie say on the phone to the nursing staff, has anyone gone to talk to Michael's sister about organ donation? And I about wrecked the car, and I go, what are you doing talking about organ donation? You're only going to talk about organ donation if Michael were to die, and she's not going to die. So we're not going to talk about organ donation. Well, that was wishful thinking on my part and completely wrong. When I arrived at the hospital, she was on a ventilator, which is not life support. That simply allows the lungs to continue to breathe and inflate until decisions can be made as to what would happen with those 7 viable organs that her parents did make that decision to donate. Actually, her husband, my brother-in-law, stepped out in the bigger waiting room with gobs of people and with the other children, and I was in the smaller waiting room with the representative from what's called Midwest Organ Transplant Network, which is here in Kansas City, came and visited with my sister and me about how would this procedure happen and would my sister like to do that. It was the first time we had ever had a conversation in my family about organ donation. This happened 21 years ago. And one of the things that we were able to do was to pull up Micah's driver's license, and at that point, it could indicate that she had indeed intended to be an organ donor. That gave my sister sort of a peace of mind that this is what Micah would have wanted. However, that alone does not guarantee that you will be an organ donor, because your next of kin, her parents, could have overruled that, but they did not. As a result of Micah being so healthy, had never smoked, no drugs that I knew of, minimal drinking, if any, all of her organs were in pristine condition, and with sudden death, there had been no deterioration. And so I was the person who guided my sister through that gut-wrenching process of liver, yes, kidneys, yes, there's 2, pancreas, yes, heart, yes, I can't remember the other one, eyes, corneas, yes. Skin, and I went, no, 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 no. I can't imagine that. I can't, because of my ignorance of the process, I did not know what skin harvesting was going to be like. And I said, no, they're going to skin Micah alive. Well, Micah was already dead. And I didn't know what that was like. And I was the person who talked my sister out of donating, which is what is our largest organ, is our skin. Fast forward 11 months later, I'm taking my parents to grief counseling in Jefferson City. So that would be like 3.5 hours down, back up to Jefferson City for an hour back to the small town, driving back to Jefferson City. I would do that every day every week for 3 months. And we got through that process. And I was the person who became the liaison between my sister's family and the organ recipients. And we did receive letters and pictures of the people who had received her organs. One of them that touched my heart came to us on Micah's birthday, which was on December the 23rd. And we had got out of Kansas City to go to Big Cedar Lodge for Christmas. So it was something very non-traditional and different, so that we wouldn't just continue to miss her seat at the dining room table being filled. And we received because I told the folks at Midwest Organ Transplant Network, I said, if by any chance you get a letter at the holidays thanking the family for the gift of life, would you please fax it to Big Cedar Lodge? And lo and behold, they did. Micah's birthday, her 19th birthday, would have been December the 23rd, and a letter came that day. We celebrated her life. We had a candle from her altar there. There was her favorite birthday from her funeral altar. There was her favorite birthday cake, and we read the letter. And ironically, Micah was going to go to college to become an equine veterinarian, meaning she was going to work with horses, and she raised horses. And actually, when I created her funeral, as you mentioned, I've been in the wedding business, the event planning business now for 45 years. Transferring skills from planning a wedding to planning a funeral are really very much the same. And my sister asked me, she said, Mike, I need an extraordinary funeral for an extraordinary child. And one of the things that we did was we had a horse-drawn hearse that carried her body up to the hill in my small town where 5 generations of the Nolte family are buried. And the man who received her kidney was a man in Pennsylvania, 42 years old, who was a rodeo competition rider. He had 2 days left before he too would have died, and he had 2 little girls. And he sent a picture of himself on a horse that he was riding. How fitting was that, and what a God wink from God, that Micah's kidney was again riding horses. 11 months go by, and I am then called to plan yet another funeral for a young woman who died in a town called Mexico, Missouri, which is north of Columbia, about an hour. And this lady had died at the age of 34 of a stroke. She had lived with us her senior year at Mizzou, was a nanny to our children. Her death was totally unexpected, and she died of complications of a disease called lupus. Her family asked if I would prepare her funeral for her. I had my Micah family funeral planning folder in my front seat as I'm going down I-70 on May the 22nd, 2003, and it's 7:50 in the morning. Again, no drugs, no alcohol, no cloudy weather, no rain, and I am pulled over on I-70 near the Higginsville, Missouri exit at what's called mile marker 47 for driving too long in the left-hand lane on I-70. It was a competition between 2 cops as to who could get the first ticket of the day and the most tickets of the day. And this young man pulled me over and told me to get out of my car and get into his car. It was a Ford Crown Victoria. And I'd love to tell you I've never been pulled over before, but I have. But I will tell you, though, that I've always been taught to respect the man with the big hat by my parents. And thus, when I'm told to get out of my car and to get into the Ford Crown Victoria, I did get out of the car and went into his car. It was warmish, the air conditioning was still running, neither of us had seatbelts on. And what happened at that point is he then softened my ticket to just a warning after he found out I was going to plan a funeral. I think perhaps he felt a little sorry for me. He said, I need to see your license. And I turned to him to hand him my license like this. And what was happening behind me now be the driver of a Ford 350 pickup truck. And a man named Paul is in this truck. and he's having an argument with his wife on a cell phone, and he throws the phone on the dashboard, knocking off his sunglasses. As he's driving in the left lane, so picture left lane, right lane shoulder on I-70, he leans over to get his sunglasses off of the floor, driving 70 miles an hour, and when he leans over, he swerves from the left lane to the right lane to the shoulder and clips right past the Ford Crown Victoria that I was sitting in. The trooper had just filled up the car 20 minutes earlier with 19 gallons of gas, and it was what's called an instant inferno. The car was fully engulfed in fire in 1.8 seconds. That's now. Boom. 1.8 seconds. And from the back bumper to the front fender, the temperature inside the car rose to be 2,500 degrees. To give you a sense of how hot is 2,500 degrees, in 9/11, when the World Trade Center was hit with the murderous airplanes, the jets, the steel beams of the World Trade Center started to melt at 2,000 degrees. Again, I repeat, the temperature inside the car was 2,500 degrees in 3 seconds. Two brave men from the Kansas City area, who were not riding together, did not know each other, one from Pleasant Hill, one from Liberty, Missouri. They were brave enough, among the 70 people who stood on the side of the highway watching the car burn, to risk their life to reach into the passenger window and pull my unconscious body out through the window. I had 15 seconds left, is what the accident reconstructionist said, before I too would have burned to death. The resulting complication to me was that I was burned over 40% of my life body with 3rd and 4th degree burns. What that degree of burning means is that 1st degree is like a sunburn, 2nd degree might be a blister, 3rd degree, if you're the 3rd layer of the epidermis, that means that's going to have to be grafted. And the 4th degree means it burns through the bone. Particularly in my right leg, where there was an air tunnel coming from the back windshield that had been broken out, the fire was like a blowtorch into this leg down here. I was airlifted off of I-70 and taken to the University of Missouri Hospital in Columbia, the same hospital where Micah had been 11 months earlier. So can you imagine the PTSD for my mom and dad, my sisters, my wife, my children, to come back to the same hospital? I'm told my father simply slid down the wall when he came into the hospital, knowing that he was going to have another member of his family die. However, the story turned differently for me. I was in a coma for 14 days. The doctor asked how long. He wanted to cut off both of my legs. They call it bilateral amputation because the burns were so deep in my legs. My wife, the RN, said, how long can we last? Because I want Michael to have a vote on this. I don't want him to wake up with no legs. And the doctor said 14 days before gangrene would make it mandatory. I woke up on the 13th day, and I voted to keep my legs, which then put me into a horrible recovery program that lasted almost 2 years. Now, the video that I'm about to show you is important because if I don't have this video to back up what I'm saying, you could think I'm just a smooth-talking city slicker wedding planner and you'd go, nah, that couldn't have happened. But it really did happen. And so through the miracles of modern medicine and phenomenal plastic surgery, I had 18 surgeries. I received 18 units of blood during that time. But more importantly, I received the organ that I needed to preserve my legs and preserve my life, and that was the gift of skin. It was the exact gift that I talked my sister out of giving from Micah. Oprah told me, Michael, that is your full circle moment. And so I am a tremendous advocate of the gift of skin, bone, tendons, because without that, I would not look like this. This ear was melted off, all the skin on my face was burned off, all of my scalp was burned off. The back of my hand, when I was handing him the license, this is burned down to the bone structure and then was webbed together. This would not bend for about 5 months. And this down here does not look pretty. I wear a special special makeup each day that covers up the burn scars, particularly here in my forehead and the left side of my head. Because in my business, kind of my up and the shoulders up is sort of my calling card, and I didn't want my appearance to be distracting to the brides and grooms that I was helping them through the life chapter moment of planning their wedding. So I'm very adapted now. They actually had classes for us from the burn unit for the male burn victims there to learn how to apply. They didn't call it makeup, they called it cover up. But down here you go, oh, that guy's been in a bad fire. So I'm going to share with you now the video to give you a sense of what was that day, what was that process like, and then we'll talk about what that process happened in the hospital.
Just pulled over a car, put the driver in his cruiser when they were hit from behind by a 1-ton truck and trailer going more than 65 miles an hour. Their cruiser burst into flames, killing Newton.
Enough welcome home signs for nearly every side of the house as friends and relatives pile in for the afternoon. Their joy, emotion, and excitement could hardly be contained as the businessman immobilized for the last 2 months in a Columbia burn unit walked, as he'd wished all that time, to his front door, assuring his well-wishers with one lasting message.
I am home. Yay!
Would be to tell you that I was confined to be at home for over a full year as I came home in a wheelchair and then a walker and then a cane, and I wear special prosthetics in the bottom of my shoes to keep my balance. I had morphine in my pocket for about 4 years as a painkiller. I never got addicted to it, thank heaven. But the process in which skin is harvested and then how it is transferred to the burn victim, this is relevant to today as we're talking about the importance of organ donation. What I did not realize is when they would harvest skin, because I have to back up. Initially, they will harvest the skin that you saw in that one picture of my legs in the OR that had those yellow, look like cheese slices on the top of that. That's all grafted skin. That was all donor skin that somebody who had died before me had gifted. They put it in little saran wraps and they keep it in the fridge. And I don't know who they're from, but they pasteurize them to get out any bacteria. And then they patch them on the legs in different places and hope, just like sod going on your body, that it will take roots and that it will stay with it. Now, many times that did not happen. In fact, most of the time it did not happen. And those skin grafts that were about the size of a saltine cracker would then begin to rot. The word was called necrotic. And then that piece of skin, I'd have to go back in to what they called the tank every other day to be debrided. And debriding is the process by which they tear off all of the skin in your body that is now burned beyond healing or now has started to rot. It is the highest level of pain the human body can withstand without losing your mind. And it was excruciating pain. The process of debridement lasted 2 hours and I was debrided 121 times. It was mental torture. but I had to have that done. But then eventually that they will then move from donor skin to what we call it autograft, meaning it comes off the human of my own skin. So DNA matches. So here on my belly and here on my quads, they would harvest this skin off. And it's like just like a little cheese slicer, and they just take off that top layer of skin and then graft it back in the spots where it looks like the body is ready to be tricked and accept new skin. They staple or stitch it on during that time. The key thing is that if you should decide to be a skin donor, and I hope you will consider it, you can always have an open casket. What I did not know in Micah's case, I thought that's a ritual within my family that we find very healing to have an open casket funeral. But in harvesting skin from someone who has died suddenly, they of course take nothing from the shoulders above and nothing in the private areas and hands. So an open casket could have certainly been a possibility. And my picture of, oh, this is going to be just a bloody, mutilated corpse, that wasn't ever going to be the case, but I didn't know. That's why I feel so compelled, even 2 decades later, to volunteer my time to give this talk to high schools throughout the Kansas City area. I used to do a bunch of them, and now I need to get my butt back in gear and do it again, because I do enjoy the feedback of people saying, I never do a thing about skin donation. I think about the solid 7 organs, and you really taught me about skin, bone, muscle, and ligaments. I was then eventually able to have all that skin take, and as a result of that now, you see me walking and standing without a cane even. And in terms of pain now, it's hardly ever there. I would have to be walking a long ways on cement, not grass or carpeting, before I'd feel it in my right leg. More importantly, though, I've gotten to meet 2 men who saved my life, that's a side story, and CBS surprised me with that. I did not know how that was going to turn out. We had a surprise reunion, which was incredible, and CBS won an Emmy for it. It's called The American Hero. So I would like to wrap up right now my presentation about this is the process of skin donation, and also in honoring Micah to know that we have received letters from every one of the people who received her organs, and she has continued and blessed their life. There was a 62-year-old grandmother whose grandchildren sent us a drawing of her being able to skip rope and jump rope with them again, and connections that we've had there. It's been a life-enhancing experience. Me being nearly burned to death in a car explosion was the best thing that ever happened to me, for me to truly believe that there is so much quality of life, and I want to be one of those people that's considered a giver and not a taker. I wrote a book about it called Burned But Not Broken. The reason for that title is a double entendre. I was burned, but not a single bone was broken. Same thing for Trooper Newton, who I forgot to mention. He did burn to death sitting in the car seat next to me over the course of 3 minutes and 37 seconds. But neither of us had any broken bones. All of our injuries were caused by gasoline-fed fire from that car that is no longer being made because of all the lawsuits against them and all the people that were killed because of a faulty fuel tank. So I'm relieved about that, but I started to say that the other good thing that came from the wreck is the passage of the law that says just move over, and that is because it was only a law in 9 states at the time of my wreck that you're supposed to move over when you see flashing lights on the shoulder, move to the left lane, and if you can't move to the left lane, slow down. If you do not move to the left lane when you see flashing lights on the shoulder, this could be a wrecker, it could be a fire truck, it could be an ambulance, but if you see flashing lights on the shoulder, you cannot continue on your merry way in that lane right next to those flashing lights. That is a ticketable offense and should be. And so as a result of this particular wreck that happened in Missouri, that law was passed by President Bush and signed into law, and I was one of the people that helped to champion that through Capitol Hill with our then U.S. Senator Jim Talent. So a lot of wonderful good things have come from this. There's memorial services every year at the crash site. I continue to take a wreath there on May the 22nd and also one at Christmas time. I'm in contact with one of the 2 men that's still alive that saved my life. His birthday is December 14th, so Dave will be hearing from me again. I was able to give back to them like they gave to me. I'm in the wedding business and they had daughters, so I was able to provide them with weddings as a part of my thank you. And with that point right now, I'm going to hush up my mouth, as they say in the South, and I'd love to just answer questions from you about the process of either Micah's story, my story, the process, organ donation. What questions and fears do you have right now? Because I'm standing here as living proof that it works. And if somebody had not made that donation of skin, tissue, and bone, I would have no legs. You can yell it out. I'll repeat the question for you.
Have you seen or like talked to Paul, the person who hit you guys?
The man who hit me? Yes, Paul Daniels, I did. It was very important to me to get to know him. I needed to know what made him tick. And I was in kind of sequestered for 2 years until the first lawsuit against Ford Motor Company came out. And I was not allowed to read any newspapers, talk to anybody connected with the wreck in any way. I would be on the stand one day at the Jackson County Courthouse that wanted my testimony to be what they called pristine. After that trial happened and I lost, I was then able to go do anything I wanted to do. And a part of it was to go meet him. And I did go to meet him. He lived up near Maysville, Missouri. And that was another life-enhancing experience in my life. And what I asked for would be just an hour of his time and stayed for. And at the conclusion of that visit, I offered him my full none of action forgiveness and told him to go forth with this experience behind us and let's do good stuff with our lives together. But yes, I have met him. Yes, sir.
What was one of the processes you wish you didn't have to go through?
I'm sorry?
Like, what was one of the processes you wish you didn't have to go through?
One of the processes I wish you didn't have to go through? By far, debridement. Debridement is when you're conscious for debridement. Now, granted, and how that process works is I'm sitting on a little metal bench, almost like a shower bench, in what looks like a kiddie wading pool, and they have little pipes of water that flood down from my face down because there's blood just oozing out of my scalp and my face all the way down into little bits of tissue. And at the end of the 2-hour process, this wading pool was filled with my blood and bits of my skin. And even though there was an IV full throttle in both arms, the pain was off the chart. And now that I've survived debridement 121 times, literally there's nothing that I couldn't survive now. It was horrific. Next question. Yes, ma'am. What did I tell myself?
During that time.
What did I tell myself during the recovery from the accident? Yeah. You're never supposed to evaluate questions when you're the speaker, but that's a very good question. What did I tell myself during the time of recovery? As you can see, I came out at the end of the summer, and by fall, my family was back into school. My wife was going to work, and she was kind of managing the bridal store for me. She took a break from nursing for a while to do that, and I was alone at home. And my clinical depression was, Grand Canyon depression, in spite of therapy, in spite of antidepressant. And there was a single morning in which I decided I had 2 choices. I was either going to stay bitter or get better. And I made a choice to get better. And I had to, how was I going to craft getting better? Is that I decided the best thing I could do to not think about myself was to think about someone else. And so I decided that I was going to do 2 gestures of kindness a day. One for somebody outside of my family and one for something inside my family. And there was a lady, one of my teachers, my girls' teachers at Scion, who I know was having chemotherapy. And I called Mrs. Craig and I just said, this is Michael Nolte, you don't have to answer your back. I know you're having chemo today. I'm kind of a Catholic guy who prays the rosary. I'm going to say some prayers for you today. I just want you to know I'm thinking of you. The second thing I did for my family was I looked at the toaster where the kids had gone off and left it with peanut butter and crumbs and jelly all over it, cooked on it. And I thought, I could clean that damn toaster. And I rolled in my wheelchair, and I put a bath towel on my lap, and this was my one good hand, and I got some soft scrub, and I rubbed on that toaster. It took me 2 hours, but I cleaned the toaster. The toaster became an important part of my recovery story, and then when we did, we had a big party to thank a lot of people who have been so kind to us after 2 years. And the party favors were that story about how I made that switch to not be bitter, but rather to get better. And there were little toaster ornaments on stands and a little book with the story on it. And the cake lady who does all my wedding cakes made a great big cake in the shape of that exact toaster. I oftentimes take the toaster with me to speaking engagements now. I would never throw it away. Next question. But that's what I told myself. The byline of the book, Burned But Not Broken, is for what was I spared? I never asked, why did this happen to me? There's all kinds of horrible things that happen to other people that don't deserve them at all. I didn't say why this happened to me. I said, why was I spared? Why did this man who had the same initials, Michael Newton, Michael Nolte, 25, 47, family man, married. How was it that he burned to death and I was pulled out with 15 seconds? For what was I spared? I have to believe that the reason, partly, that I was spared is that on November the 8th, I would be here at the Rose Auditorium speaking to you at Rockhurst High School.
How long was the full recovery process?
The full recovery? Well, I would identify full recovery when I could wear lace-up shoes again and that I didn't need special orthotics. And they also have a process for burn victims that they have to have compression, meaning that if you've ever seen a burn victim that their skin is all ropey, like grapevines on there, that's because they were not physician compliant and they didn't wear their compression garment. I had a compression garment on this hand that smushed this hand. I had like these ski tights that came up to here that were so tight, they were custom made, and they would measure the circumference of my thigh all the way around, and then I swear they made them half that size. Put these on to hold down that healing grafted skin, and it hurt horribly. And I had to wear the compression tights for 2 years. So I think I would think of my healing over that 2-year process. In 2 years, I didn't have to wear compression tights. I didn't have to wear special shoes any longer. So it was a full 2 years before I came back and pulled the select.
Sadly, we only have time for one more question.
Okay.
One more question.
Next question. Come on, guys. Don't be afraid. Yes, sir.
We have a number of students here, and they're going to be going back to their high schools, and some of them are, going to be talking with their friends, and some of them are making choices now. What would you say to them about just making a decision, being an organ donor, and how beneficial it can be to them and their friends' lives?
Again, the point is we cannot be here to convince you to become organ donors, but let me share with you from the perspective of my sister and brother-in-law and her siblings. It gives them great comfort to know that as tragic as their daughter's death was, she's enhanced the lives of 7 other people that are still living 21 years longer and are having a fullness of life that they never would have had if they had not received that organ. So I'm a big, big advocate. I talk about it all the time. It's in all my wishes. There's even floats in the Rose Bowl Parade. I'm a big parade junkie. And at the Rose Bowl Parade, there's a Donate Life float that will have medallions of various donors and members of their family to walk along the float as well. So I feel there's kind of a byline we use in our industry is, heaven knows we don't need your organs. We need your organs here on earth. And the fact that it's done in a medical setting and a procedure is nothing different than a surgery and how they retrieve the organs and they quickly then transplant them into somebody whose life turns immediately for the better. It's extremely peace-giving to the family. That it?
Ladies and gentlemen, one more time, give that round of applause for the incredible Mike.